maybe he'll just be a little bit late. So we will forge on as we do have quorum. So we'll have a call to order, and first order of business is O Canada. So I'll ask you to rise. Clerk, I don't know how you're going to be able to do that if you have no sound. And I don't think everybody wants to hear me sing tonight. Please rise. Please be seated. Okay, so I will ask for any declaration of interest or general nature thereof. If you have an interest, please declare it. And I don't see anybody declaring anything at this point, so we'll move on with the consent agenda. Excuse me. So the consent agenda, the first motion that's on the floor is that the January 17th, 2022 Committee of the Whole and Council meeting minutes, the February 7th, 2022 Public Planning meeting, the February 7th, 2022 public meeting, and the February 7th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes be adopted as circulated. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? I don't see anybody's hand going up, so I need a mover and a seconder. Jameson and maybe. Thank you. Any comments or queries? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we're carried. Thank you. Next on the motion, the next motion is in regards to approving staff reports. So I need a mover and a seconder for that. Lackey and Jameson. Okay. And the motion reads that council approves staff reports as recommended at the February 7th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting minute. Committee of the Whole meeting. Discussion on the motion. I think there was some will to have planning report SR-012-22 pulled from the consent agenda to be further discussed. Is that an amendment? Go ahead, Councillor Jameson. Okay, so.
I believe that that is the discussion of the towers.
Correct.
Would that include both? Because we're dealing with fundamentally the same challenges. Or not, I'm just suggesting.
So the motion is to pull SR-012-22, the application for Rogers Communication Tower for 3105 County Road 3. And it would also be for SR-013-22 application for Rogers Communications Tower 632 Escott Young Town Line. Is that what you're asking, Councillor Jameson?
Yes, please.
Okay. 012. Bear with me, please. I just want to make sure that I have it written down correctly for the clerk because we're not in the same room. 322. So the motion would be amended, Councillor Jameson, you're asking for that amendment. Can I have a seconder for the amendment, please? Okay, thank you. Unless there is no further staff reports that need to be pulled, I don't believe. Okay, so I'll ask for a vote on the amendment, which is pulling SR-01222 and SR-01322. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify. All those opposed? Okay, that's carried. So the original motion is that council made by Deputy Mayor Lackey and seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the council approves staff reports as recommended at the February 7th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting, with the exception of SR-01222, SR-013-22. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? And the motion is carried. So dealing with two motions, or the two planning reports that are pulled, we need to get them on the floor in order to discuss them. So what I will do is, hang on here. So the motion, we'll deal with them separately, I think, rather than congruently. Would that be better for you, Ms. Venditti? Yes? Okay. So we'll deal with SR-01222 first. So I need a mover and a seconder to discuss that council. How am I going to do this? Sorry. I apologize. There's a motion specific to this one. Too many piles of papers. I apologize. Sorry. So the motion is, I'll read it first and then I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. Motion reads, whereas a consultation process has occurred regarding a proposed communication facility tower at 3105 County Road 3 for Rogers Communications Inc., represented by Eric Belchamber and Associates, the agent. And whereas telecommunication facilities are regulated by Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada, formerly Industry Canada, under the Radio Communication Act, which requires proponents to consult with local land use authorities and follow local protocol concerning location of such facilities. And whereas the township has a consultation protocol described in the telecommunication tower and related facilities protocol, the protocol, which includes the council providing comment on the proposed tower. And there, now be it resolved, council directs staff to submit a letter of concurrence to the agent indicating that the agent has complied with the protocol. So I need a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor for discussion. Councillor Maybe, and then Deputy Mayor Lackey. Okay, so the motion is on the floor. I'll bring the council's attention to the last paragraph, which reads that therefore council directs staff to submit a letter of concurrence to the agent indicating the agent has complied with protocol. Discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Ms. Venditti.
Thank you, through your worship. If I could just clarify, the report that was presented to council last week, the last paragraph read, now therefore Committee of the Whole recommends that council support the proposed location of the tower at 3105 County Road 3 and direct staff to submit a letter of concurrence. The motion that you just read was an amended motion, just for clarification purposes.
Okay, so this was based off of discussions held at the meeting last week at Committee of the Whole, that we have the ability as the municipality to provide concurrence and basically state to the powers that be that the the agent has met the protocol and Rogers Communication. So this does not provide a letter of support or against having the tower being located there, but it does indicate that the company has met the protocol and the terms and conditions that are required by Industry Canada, or Economic Development Canada, I should say. So is there any further discussion on this? Go ahead, Councillor Jameson and the Deputy Mayor Lackey, and then maybe.
It's really not specific to this application, but both applications, and also encompasses the Ellisville tower that council approved. And I learned today and was corrected, understanding that that is going ahead. But I learned today, and correct me, Planning Director, if through your worship, that is not going to be built until 2023, even though it was actually approved a year and a half ago, or at least a year ago. Is that correct, Madam Planner?
Through your worship, that timing is correct. I would note that comment from the township is not the last step of the approval process, and that there's additional work that needs to be done to obtain approvals prior to construction. So it's not necessarily that nothing has been done or happening on that tower. It's just that construction hasn't commenced.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification. So I guess what I'm struggling with is wanting to know if your worship, I know you've worked very hard on this trying to find middle ground, and I appreciate that. But if our planning department is satisfied that this applicant has met our protocols, or what appears to be other people's protocols, to which we are expected to concur. So the challenge for me is, having now spent, thanks to Professor Gorell, some time going through a mountain of documents and trying to understand this, that we must make assumptions that they are concurring with the set of regulations that we as a council, individual council members, would not have the expertise in. So while we may think we have a NIMBY issue because we have a number of citizens, particularly in the outlet, who are concerned about the placement of this tower, for us, it appears that concurring with the process has nothing to do with whether we want it or like it there or whatever. And this is what I really still am not understanding and need clarification. The other thing that our residents need to know is that, notwithstanding the way this is rushed in their minds, and I agree with that, there appear to be, and again, this is where I look to your worship for direction, that there are alternatives. There are dispute resolution, knowing what we know about the Ellisville Tower. Nobody's going to be putting a shovel in the ground tomorrow morning. Under any circumstances, they won't be. So that, notwithstanding what we have to decide here, there appears to be, and I would stand corrected by people that know better than me, that we as citizens, and I'm not talking as a counselor, I'm talking as a resident, have some alternatives to discuss with the regulators whether this has been managed as well as it could be. So my question is, what is our actual obligation here, and what can we expect one way or the other if we concur or not? And I just want to add one more point, particularly in light of what we were told very late in that last meeting, Your Worship, that failure, I guess, to concur would be the end of broadband, or not broadband, it's not even broadband, cellular service in our township. So I'd sure like to be straightened out on this before we go to a vote. Thank you for your listening to me, folks.
Ms. Venditti, go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. I have had the opportunity to have subsequent conversations with the applicant since the meeting last week. Just in terms of that, I did provide to council earlier today the summary of public input that was received by the consultant through their consultation process. That was distributed earlier today. In discussing the process with the applicant, as well as these particular applications, what I did come to find out is that the proposed 2 towers in front of council are 2 towers in the first phase of 50 towers that are proposed through the EORN project. So they have been identified as areas of high priority, given that they are in the first phase. That being said, if council does not concur with the location of the towers and the towers being placed as proposed, there are other towers in the priority rating that could be put in place so that these would not happen. What I was informed was that if council doesn't concur with the proposal, there's a different process that they go through that's called an impasse process, or that can be gone through, but it's a difficult process. And given the number of municipalities that are in need of improved cellular service, they wouldn't necessarily bother going through that process. They would just move on.
I have Councillor Deputy Mayor Lackey, and then I have Councillor Maybe, then Councillor Oakey. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. To the planner, what is our actual authority when it comes to these towers? What control do we have?
So through you, Your Worship, the towers are approved based on ISED. We're not the approval authority. However, we are the commenting authority in terms of whether we concur with the tower's location. So if we say that we don't want the tower and we don't have concurrence from council on that, as I said, they have to go through a different process, which is the impasse process, which is a much more onerous process than the one we're going through right now. So given that, it's the position or the information that I received from the applicant that it wouldn't move ahead and that they would select a different site, not necessarily in our township. They would select a different location to put in a tower where the local municipality wants it and concurs with it.
Follow up.
Your Worship, yes, follow up. As someone who used to live right near where the tower was going, I had no service there, and I was just at an event for Super Bowl on the other side of Charleston Lake, who had no, you couldn't get any service at all. So I think it's necessary, but I just think we have to be cautious where we put it. I actually called Rogers when I was living there and said, I have land, I have the elevation, come and put a tower in, and they never did.
Okay, so Councillor Maybe and then Councillor Oakey.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, or to you. Last week, the Rogers representative, Eric Bellchamber, he mentioned about a 90-day hold on this to possibly get hold of more residents in the area so that they're fully informed of this particular tower. So I bring that to light, but also the Ellisville Road Tower that was talked about. If I remember correctly, the service that's going on that is TELUS and Bell, not Rogers. So again, this kind of goes to the point that I talked about in the last few times we've had towers come up, is sharing of towers. And if we're going to put a tower up for every particular agency who wants to put cell service in here, the 50 towers that Rogers wants to put in our area will be triple that if we keep it up. So I think we really need to consider what we can do here. And I know that we were very close to having the cable going to everybody's home, which I really, and we all were disappointed with when that was changed. And that's something that our residents really need to know, is that we almost had the deal, which has been explained many, many times by the mayor and press media and whatever other media we can get out there. So, you know, for all of us, it's a very big disappointment that we don't have this high-speed fiber to actually, you know, get our internet, our TV, or our cell service up. But having so much opposition to a particular tower and its type of tower, I think, is more what it is. They want the service, but they don't like that type of tower. And I alluded to that also last week with the Rogers representative. What else can we do? So I wonder if there's still, is that question still valid? That, you know, maybe we find another solution to the whole thing. Towers aren't the only option, I doubt. So maybe we need to try to stress that. But again, the 90 days, I think we need to get more information into the residents' hands to ensure that everybody is informed, because that's the last thing we want to have happen on this particular year. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Venditti, if I could make a couple of comments. I'd like you to speak to the 90 days, but I want to provide some clarity here. The tower that's being proposed is not for necessarily for wireless internet. It can be a part of it, but this is to provide cell service in areas. And when you made the comment in regards to Rogers putting up 50 towers, this is for the EORN project. So it doesn't necessarily mean, I don't know if it's necessarily Rogers that's doing all 50 of those. Ms. Venditti can speak to that. But as far as the way it's been proposed is that this is for cell communications. Yes, there's data that goes across it, but currently right now back at the outlet, it's serviced by Lansdowne Telephone Company. So I believe there is connectivity out there from an internet point of view. I could stand corrected on that, but I believe as long as you have a 659 number, you can get like high-speed internet connected through wire out there. It might be copper, not fiber, but it is connected to that point. So Ms. Venditti, can you speak to the 90 days and whether or not they're all Rogers towers, the 50 proposed?
Certainly, through your worship. I can't confirm whose towers they all are, but I do want to provide the clarification that based on the regulations around towers, co-location is required as much as possible to reduce the number of towers. So you wouldn't get a whole separate set of Bell towers, a whole separate set of TELUS towers, because co-location is encouraged. With respect to the 90 days, that is something that the applicant mentioned last week. If council did want to increase the timeline by the 90 days as discussed, I think that we would need some very specific direction around what that means and what you're hoping for us to do. Based on the information that was circulated, it was circulated in accordance with the tower protocol. So every landowner within 3 times the height of the tower was notified. I did note in the information that I circulated earlier today that I believe it was 22 landowners were identified with respect to the location of this particular tower, and there was a limited amount of input received. So I guess if council is going to go down the road of looking at additional consultation, we'd need some specific parameters around that, because we've already done the required circulation. So I want to know what additional council is looking for.
Okay, so I'll take that under advisement in regards to the 90 days. I'd like to hear the rest of the speakers before we go down that path. Go ahead, Councillor Olkey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Given my old background, I can't share this with everybody, but it's my old land ordinance survey map. It's a 1/50,000 map. It is somewhat out of date. This map is accurate enough to fire artillery off of or direct someone like Brock Burrell to go and drop drugs on bugs or something like that. Looking at it, I understand why they have cited the tower where they did, because it covers the area from Delta Main Road over to Lost Bay, up through Black Rapids, down up to Donaldson Point and would encompass all the area that is around Woodvale and Outlet Reach in Charleston Lake. Now, they were a bit coy about saying who their subscribers were, but my rough count of dwellings, whether they're full or part-time dwellings, I can't tell from this old map. But this old map probably gives me about 300 separate dwellings, and this map is 20 years old. So there's probably about 500 or 600 dwellings of one type or another in that region. Now, where they've sited their tower is very convenient for them because it's a few hundred meters, if that, off of Route 3, and it's adjacent to power. I do understand things like line of sight, and the best line of sight actually would put the tower a couple of kilometers further south, about 2.5 kilometers east on Warburton Road, and on a hill feature that goes to 150 meters. The hill feature they're putting it on is 100 meters. There are a number of 100-meter features in the near vicinity of where they want to put the tower. So they're getting what they see as optimal coverage at most convenience to them. I think people should just keep that in the back of their minds. Okay, they're going to hit more houses by putting the tower where it is and make it easier for themselves to build it and sustain it. So there's a quid pro quo with this, which isn't going to make some people happy, but government often is about the greatest good for the greatest number. And this is hard. This is hard for some people. I imagine quite a number of people would welcome it. So they were coy about numbers and they let slip 400. I suspect they would have at least that many subscribers and maybe up to double that amount.
Thank you, Councillor Oki. I recognize Councillor Foti had his hand up, so I'll let you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our planner, you said we had a limited number of responses. Like the majority here on council at work, these letters that came late in the day via email, they're sitting here printed off. I have yet to look at them. That's the disadvantage of people sending in information late on the 11th hour. My question is to the planner, if you can, the limited responses, can you give us a generic opposed and in favor?
Go ahead, Ms. Wendy.
Yes, through you, certainly. Responses that were circulated today are the responses that were sent to Rogers based on their consultation. I can tell you that the emails that I sent out last week prior to the committee of the whole meeting with the public input contained all but one of the submissions that you've received today. The one submission that is new relates to the property on Slade and Town Line Road. So there's nothing new in there that council didn't see last week at the public meeting, with the exception of an email that was circulated to council as a whole following the public meeting last week. There was one email from a resident. In response to that, there was 2 letters of opposition with respect to the tower on County Road 3 from Mr. Van Allen and Mr. Robertson, who spoke last week. The other letters that were received were, one was with a question about lighting and the other was indifferent, just indicating that they were aware of the application but reserving comment. And nothing more has come from that. There was also one individual who attended the public meeting with respect to the outlet tower last week, who I provided the information to, who hasn't provided any subsequent comment.
If I may, I have a couple more comments / questions.
Go ahead.
Councilor Wilkie has done a good job in his military background of indicating and substantiating why Rogers has chose this location. We have to go back to what the planner had stated right off the get-go here. Rogers has complied with what we as a township require for any applications along this sort. I, for one, am a very strong advocate of landowners' rights. The owner that owns the land on which this tower is to be located has every right to make an agreement with Rogers. However, such has been indicated, there's bound to be a few that are not happy about it. My phone call this week was to the fire chief. What takes precedence with me in a township is the safety of our residents. Nobody sits higher on that ladder in this township than the fire chief. I asked the fire chief a very pointed question this week. Is there a communication issue between the outlet and nearing Lyndhurst? Because I know for myself on my own cell phone, that same stretch of road is almost non-existent. His response, and I'll just ad lib, it's seriously limited and in a number of cases non-existent. So if you translate that to people that are on the trails, on the water, at their cottages, at their homes, on those roads, and they dial 911 and they can't even get out, let alone get a response, we have an obligation as council to make sure we can do all we can to protect our residents. I'll leave it at that.
Are there any further comments in regards to, go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
Last comment. While I appreciate, and particularly Councillor Oakey's demonstration of potential coverage and so on, that is speculative. To the extent that Councillor Oakey is not deciding this, the challenge I have is hardly with Councillor Oakey's point of view on what it might do, but the fact that we were not provided anything remotely resembling a plan, an actual impact in the area, or how it connects to everything else. It's all very random, very vague, very sloppy. That's my real challenge with all this. It is undoubtedly true that no matter where a tower is going to go, someone isn't going to like it. And that's the end of the story. The reality is too, and I live up here, that there's nothing between where I live and basically the township offices for me because of the way County Road 3 is, and that's my driveway home from the township. So Councillor Foti is quite correct. And the junction, there is nothing at all. Now, what's good for Rogers is good for the nation. So we got to hope that other telcos co-locate on the towers so that I can use my bell and not have to switch. But the important thing that I'm getting, because I sent out quite a large number of people what they were thinking about this with all this material. And basically a lot of people out here, now I'm not talking about our friends in the outlet, they think we're talking internet. They think we're talking broadband. And as the mayor has pointed out correctly, this is cellular service. This will satisfy a very, not a small portion, an important portion, but it is not the thing I hear every day about we can't get internet, our kids can't get on it, we can't do this, we can't do that. So the confusion we will be dealing with, regardless of what we decide, is this dichotomy, this challenge between what we are going to concur with and what is actually the expectation among our residents. So on that basis, I'd just like to end by saying it's been a sloppy, semi-professional effort on the part of Rogers to communicate. While they attest to the fact that they've done everything, we have to take their word for it. If our planner advises us that they have, I believe our planner because I have great trust in our department. But let's not pretend that this process is anything but just awful. And that's my view on the whole thing.
Okay, I see Councillor Burrell, and then after Councillor Burrell speaks, we're gonna bring this to a close one way or the, oh, sorry, Councillor Oakey, I didn't see you there. Go ahead. At once Councillor Burrell's done. Go ahead, Councillor Burrell.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. I am not an expert on what's all going on here, but I can tell you this. The EORN project, do not forget, is sanctioned or paid for by the feds and the province through EORN. It's a $300 million project that Rogers won a competitive bid, as I understand it, through EORN. They bid on it, they won it. So, and in that, they are providing it says in their document here that was provided, and this document that they provided very carefully follows the ISED requirements on the CPC 20-03 requirements. It goes through each and every one of them. That's the point of their document. It's it's a boilerplate, but it does say in there, it says beyond, they're providing cellular coverage for voice and data, and it goes on to say as much that and wireless internet through Rogers Rocket Stick Technologies. Well, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is fixed wireless something or other. They're going to be no different, in my opinion, than any other fixed wireless provider. They're going to offer the programs, they're going to offer the level of service, they're probably going to offer the packages, they're going to be within $10 of each other, they're going to try and lure you over. That's what they're all doing right now. So that's the EORN project. Let's not forget that. That's I think that's pretty significant, because that is Eastern Ontario's stated policy now. And I'm going to get to that later tonight. I didn't really want to tie it into towers, but that is the stance on Infrastructure Ontario. Bingo. Now, with respect to safety, if people are not getting phone coverage, and I appreciate that they may have to update their phone to something into the 21st century, what we now call smartphones that can deal with data, that is moving into the future. So we can live in the past, or we can push something forward here. I have no objection. These towers, it appears to the government that we need them. So I would have enjoyed a good deal more fiber, a lot more fiber out there, but that obviously, unless the new reverse auction, which I will touch on this later as well, but no data on that is being released until later this spring, and that's been stated twice. So the government has indeed committed to, and I will talk about this, to 100% coverage, broadband coverage by 2025 in Ontario. And that includes difficult and underserved areas. And I'll talk a little bit about how Infrastructure Ontario, with that big $4 billion war chest, are planning to do that. Just briefly, I don't have a ton of detail. But so this project, I know we're talking about a tower, but let's not be misled. It's going to take towers to move us forward here. So I will support the towers. Now, with respect to objections and so on to tower placements, the only area, if we offer the letter of concurrence, I see here the timing is, people can make a letter of opposition, and then there's a timing where Rogers responds to them, and then 21 days later, the person in opposition can refer back. That's many days here. So my question is this: what does the township offer a letter of concurrence that the applicant, the proponent, did their diligence with respect to the municipality's rules, and I believe they have. So therefore, there is still that process where Rogers has to respond to people, and all that information goes to ISED as laid out in that document. So I don't see, unless, and I stand corrected, I don't see that we shouldn't offer our concurrence. We don't have to say that we agree with everything, but we offer our concurrence that they followed the rules. And then folks, I believe, are open to opposition, and there's a process. It keeps the doors open, and it moves this along. There are time limits on this document, and it's so, these documents are dense for amateurs like ourselves, but there are time limits. And ISED, they expect to see this wrapped up in 120 days. from the time when the proponent brings it before council. That's what I read. So to me, I don't think that we have to hold back on the letter of concurrence as written now. So my stand would be, I would approve that letter of concurrence. And I believe I am correct in saying that people still have an opportunity, and the proponent, Rogers, has an obligation to deal with them. And all that information goes to ISED. That is my take on it. And yes, we need we need cellular phone coverage. And if not everybody's updated, I can't help that. They're going to have to buy a new phone someday. To me, it seems inevitable. Thank you very much.
Councillor Oki, actually, before you start, Ms. Venditti, can you confirm that that the process would be, I just want to add clarification to some comments that Councillor Burrell made in regards to if we provided a letter of concurrence, that there is further, that Rogers does have to deal with any further concerns that are voiced by local residents that may step forward for a certain time frame, if they haven't already stepped forward. Go ahead.
So my understanding of the process is that Rogers is required to provide 30 days of notice and consultation, which has been done in this case. That timeline was February 11th was the 30-day. So that is the summary of public consultation that was provided to council earlier today before the meeting on each of the towers. That consultation outlines all of the input as well as Rogers' response. And that will go with their application to ISED together with any letter of concurrence from council. In speaking with the applicant, and as council has indicated as well, not everybody is going to be happy. So what ISED will be looking for is that the public input has been heard and and that responses have been given to the input.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Oki, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship, and through you, with respect to my colleague, Councillor Jameson, line of sight is actually a fairly exact science, and I believe Rogers is pretty confident of the coverage they could provide. Well, also with respect to Councillor Jameson, I agree the presentation we were given was somewhat arrogant and sloppy. If I could do that and provide you with that kind of technical information, why couldn't they? Which I think would have solved some people's satisfaction. Now, I know they're working with constellations of satellites. They've got engineers, and I have an old map, but they didn't provide you even with the information that I did. Okay, so yes, I agree with Councillor Jameson. Their arrogance is kind of, well, it's obviously fueled by federal money and this kind of stuff, and they have the hammer. But on the other hand, we have to recognize what Director Venditti is telling us, and they have essentially complied with what they were told they had to comply with. So this is, I'm not going to say it's a catch-22, but it's certainly parallel lines. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Oki. I appreciate those comments as well as all the other comments from councillors tonight. So I won't reread the motion, but I'll just reread the final amount, or the final paragraph, I should say. Now, therefore, council directs staff to submit a letter of concurrence to the agent indicating that the agent has complied with the protocol. Before I call the vote on this, are the councillors looking to provide the same letter of concurrence for the tower on, that's in regards to SR-013-2022, which is the 632 Escott/Young Town Line Road? Are you looking to provide the same letter? If so, I need an amendment to the motion to add in the first paragraph, the consultation has occurred for 3105 County Road 3 and 632 Escott Town Line Road. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that amendment? Lackey and Jameson. Okay. Okay. That just way we kill two birds with one stone. We're providing concurrence for both, if that is the will of council. So I'll ask for a vote on the amendment. All those in favor of adding 632 Escott Rockport, Escott Young Town Line Road. Okay. Okay. And that's carried. Okay, so I will read it in its entirety, which is a motion by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Lackey. Whereas a consultation process has occurred regarding a proposed communication facility tower at 3105 County Road 3 and 632 Escott Young Town Line Road for Rogers Communications Inc., represented by Eric Belchamber and Associates, the agent, and whereas telecommunication facilities are regulated by Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, formerly Industry Canada, under the Radio Communication Act, which requires proponents to consult with local land use authorities and follow local protocol concerning location of such facilities. And whereas the township has a consultation protocol described in the telecommunication tower and related facilities protocol, the protocol, which includes the council providing comment on the proposed tower. Now, therefore, council directs staff to submit a letter of concurrence to the agent indicating that the agent has complied with the protocol. All those in favor of the motion as amended, please signify. All those opposed? One opposition, and the motion is carried. Thank you, council, for the robust discussion and the comments made in regards to the process. I do believe we feel like a spider web, a fly caught in a spider web here in amongst all the other things that are trying to be accomplished by federal and provincial governments. Okay, so that means that we've gotten through our staff reports. Next motion that's on the floor is that council support the amendments to bylaw. Just want to make sure that I haven't missed something here. Amendments to bylaw 21-071 being the site plan control bylaw as set out by planning report SR-015-22, and that council approved the amending bylaw as amended attached to said report as Exhibit A. I need a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor. Am I in the right spot? Okay, I have Deputy Mayor Lackey. And then a seconder for the motion, or am I not in the right spot here? So is it my...
I think we're in the information items.
Okay. So should it be that the information items be received and filed, or should it be this motion first? I just don't want to do this out of order. Sorry.
I think, Madam Mayor, we should just go through the information items. As part of them is Councillor Gorell's update on the broadband. And then the motion would be that the information items be received and filed.
Okay, I apologize. I had something out of order there. So I'll go under the information items. I'll seek input in regards to administration report SR-024-22, the township purchase from Sly of 3300 County Road 32, Sealy's Bay. Mr. CAO, are you speaking to this, or the operations director?
I believe I am, Your Worship, and through you to council. As identified in the fire master plans from 2016 and 2021, Fire Station 2 in Sealy's Bay no longer meets the requirements of a modern day fire service and should be replaced. As part of the capital budget, 2022 capital budget approved by council, $400,000 was set aside for land acquisition and design costs. Staff were able to identify a parcel of property at the intersection of County Road 32 and Provincial Highway 15 up in Sealy's Bay that was available for sale. It's a 6.48 acre parcel with approximately 2.5 acres that would be appropriate for a fire station. It offers easy access to both County Road 32 and Highway 15. It's very centrally located. It would alleviate firefighters responding to go to the station to answer a call going through Sealy's Bay, and it would also take fire vehicles off of Main Street in Sealy's Bay. It also has the benefit of increasing our FUS Fire Underwriter Survey accreditation further within the township, so it would benefit residents. The property is family property owned by Keith and Gary Sly, who have a long relationship with the township. Both Gary was a firefighter, and Keith has been Keith is a local historian and heavily involved with committees here at the township. Their father, actually, I learned through the process, was Reeve for the township of the Rear of Leeds, long-standing family service. They, when we approached them, they were particularly taken with the idea of their property being put into the ownership of the township for a new fire station. We made an offer with the approval of council. We were given negotiation framework to work within, and we came to terms with Mr. Sly, and it was a very easy negotiation. They were very receptive to what we wanted to do and understood our limitations on resources. So the deal came together. We had completed our conditional due diligence. The main one was basically ensuring that the site was suitable for building the type of building that we needed to. Our engineering firm did some boreholes, and they made some recommendations. Nothing was a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. And so we were able to firm up on our conditions, and the transaction is going to be completed on March 3rd. A portion of the purchase price is $235,000 with land transfer tax and closing costs. We are still within our budget of $400,000, and recognizing that we also have to incur design costs as part of all of that. So we're in pretty good shape, and I'd just like to thank both Keith and Gary Sly for their willingness to work with us and come to a favorable agreement for everybody.
You're here.
Here is right. Thank you very much, CAO Donachie. I think this is a very important move for our northern residents, not to mention the ability for our fire service to have the right tools and trucks, if you will, that are getting bigger by the day, that will be able to be housed there. And I too would echo the comments, and I'm sure the rest of council do, to say thank you to the Sly family for being so cooperative and willing to negotiate with us in a reasonable manner so that we can further protect the residents of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands. So thank you very much to them. Next on the information report is Fire Report SR-02522, review of fire underwriter survey. Chief, did you want to give a synopsis, or is there questions that, I see that Councillor Gorell has a question about that. Councillor Gorell, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. With respect, I'm thrilled that the Sly property has been purchased by the township. That's ongoing. That's wonderful. And I would join and thank the Slys for putting that forward to us. I do have a question, and I have a question concerning a clause here. It says, upon completion of the purchase, staff will commence work on the design of a new fire station. I think I'd feel more comfortable requesting that it come before council with some parameters before we get started and get so far down that road of designing something that needs to be discussed. I don't pretend to be an expert in fire or fire stations, but I know it would be pretty easy to perhaps go overboard, or maybe build something that some people are going to question. So I would feel a little more comfortable if there were some parameters, or at least a discussion started before we end up spending some thousands of dollars to get some architect in there and drawings and so on. So I would leave it to staff to perhaps come up with something. It doesn't have to be long, just something brief as to how we're looking at that. Thank you very much.
CAO Donachie, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Worship, and through you to Councillor Gorell and Council. Yes, we will come back to Council with, I think we talked a little bit when the fire station issue or design came up about what we're looking for in broad strokes. We can refine our requirements. I know Chief Pryor and Director Holiday have been putting their heads together and considering their ideas for design. So we'll refine what we're looking for, bring a list back to council, hopefully have a ballpark idea of what kind of costs we're looking at. And I'll undertake that happens at a future council meeting for sure, before we get too far down the road on design and all that.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Chief Pryor, do you want to speak to the report, fire report SR-02522?
Yes. Yes, and through your worship, Councillor Gorell had asked in a previous council meeting for a little bit of an update on the fire underwriter survey. He was looking for a little bit of information about what FUS was, and basically wanted to know who basically controlled and whether or not we had agreements with neighboring fire departments that also were tanker shuttle qualified, and that went with the underwriter survey type of grading to assist us, and whether they had it in their own municipalities. So I've prepared a report. I have spoke with Front of Young, because I know that Front of Young and Councillor Gorell's area are very close together, and provided a mapping thanks to Public Works. They helped me to get some circle drawings in there to show that their tanker shuttle does cover the eastern part of the township for us, and they are tanker shuttle certified. So I guess I'll take any questions if any councillors have any.
This information was provided to us for our benefit. Is there any questions or comments in regard to the information? Go ahead, Councillor Gorell.
I'd like to thank the chief for preparing this report. It's something that I remember a year or two ago under previous fire chief, we were always asked for funding for the service, and it was always with respect to this magical thing called the FUS. And I recall that no one knew what it was. They couldn't define it or anything. So I thank you very much for the report, because I think it goes a long way to telling the public just what is involved in putting together a good volunteer fire service. No one argues with great volunteerism there, but I think when it comes to, it's a big ticket item on our budgets every year, and I'm very happy to have that report in front of us and say, hey, this is how it's done in the big leagues. And I compliment the chief on putting together a brief but concise report. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the chief? Seeing none, we'll move on to finance report SR-027-22, 2021 financial indicators for MMAH. Finance report SR-027-22. Are there any comments or questions for our treasurer who is on the line this evening? That's how much trust we have in our Director Tyndall. Thank you for providing the report. It does show us in a good light. We have borrowing capacity, which we have not utilized really at this point, but we'll likely have to in the future. But this is all good news, I believe, for the municipality. So thank you very much, Ms. Tyndall, for providing that. And we will also ask that Councillor Gorell provide us an update on broadband. Take it away, Councillor Gorell.
Thank you very much. I'd like to keep this brief, and I want to keep it on target. I was asked to provide a summary of a Zoom call that was provided to municipalities from Infrastructure Ontario. So it was the initial was 2 hours long, and it was a very wholesome discussion, it was a wholesome policy paper, so to speak, that infrastructure. So the Minister of Infrastructure, Ms. Kinga Surma, introduced the call, and she made the mission statement that every home in Ontario will have access to 5010 broadband by 2025. She further reiterated that exact statement on February 3rd. This initial meeting was January 18th. a second meeting was held for the county, our county, because there was a lot of confusion with things that were said. You know, it's a big deal, and there's a lot to be gleaned out of it. So Minister Clark had the same organization, Infrastructure Ontario, do the same report on February 3rd. It was a little briefer, but it was the same information generally. So highlighting it, they had the usual preamble and, you know, estimating the 700,000 homes needed service. The preamble, you know, increasing digital need with the pandemic. They talked about the impact of reliable broadband, something we're all getting pretty familiar with, the economics, et cetera, et cetera. They came, the mission statement, as I said, was all homes in Ontario will have access to 5010 internet by 2025. One thing they don't commit to is the technology that will do it, and I'll touch on that a little later. They have 4 pillars that they introduced: deliver, invest, maximize, and modernize. And of course, they went into that. But the nuts and bolts of it, from the Ontario government's point of view, they have, if you took Ontario and you took the southern, or not the northern Ontario, but if you took Ontario and had eastern Ontario and southwestern Ontario, southwestern Ontario has SWIFT. And that is, what is it? Southwestern Ontario Integrated Fiber Technology. The equivalent of Southwestern Ontario's program from Ontario's point of view is EORN. And it also is set up by a Warden's Caucus, and it is Eastern Ontario Regional Network. So the province is funding both. But my impression was, and they have some big numbers to support it, it was under the program Up to Speed Ontario Broadband and Cellular Action Plan. They claim to date, I think about $900 million has been put into that program. For us, SWIFT received a good deal of money. They put out about 96 contracts, and they have a lot more fiber down there than Eastern Ontario. And I think it's because it's the industrial heartland of Ontario, and they don't have so many of the geography problems that we maybe have here in Eastern Ontario. So SWIFT, they got 64 million, and then they got another $280 million to provide a good deal of coverage mixed. So it'd be some fiber and some fixed wireless. Northern Ontario, $41 million for 7 projects, 7,000 homes in First Nations. EORN, and we have to remember that EORN had switched up to a 1 gig project, if you remember that. And the 1 gig project was supposed to be fiber, and it was going to be, I don't know, $1.6 billion for Eastern Ontario. Well, that got kiboshed last summer or last spring with an announcement from the federal government and the Ontario government together. They said, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. So EORN did have, it seemed they had it in their pocket, but they did have what we were talking about earlier tonight, the project of fixed wireless. And so the province and the feds are each put in $71 million, and Rogers is half of that. So they're up to $300 million. And we've already touched on it. Rogers made a presentation, by the way, to the county because the county wanted an update from EORN. So an executive from Rogers, they won the competitive bid, the EORN bid, and it's 99% plus coverage of cellular mobility, and that's the goal. And along with that, there is going to be somewhere between 80, depending on the level of standard definition or high definition, between 85 and 95% coverage for fixed wireless. That was stated. So we have SWIFT, we have EORN, and we have Northern Ontario projects. And that sort of was what started in 2019. And this is where it's interesting, because then the province further knew that they weren't hitting that 700,000. They wanted to hit more homes, premises, businesses, by the way, so we'll call them premises. So it looks to me like they then put out the ICON program, which was going to sponsor 25% of the cost of projects. And they recognized that a lot of the other money was going to come from the Universal Broadband Fund. So I think it was a bit awkward on their part and maybe a bit quick of a rollout for the ICON. That was my impression. However, under their pillars, their 4 pillars and so on, they felt it was good. They did put out, and they stated that they closed ICON in 2020, closed it in 2021, excuse me. They put out $125 million to 35 projects with 25% funding. It was stated in one of those 2 meetings that they actually had sort of heard rumors, or they had heard that there were projects out there shovel ready. And I take it those were shovel ready from ISPs and so on. So there was a bit of a disconnect, I think, in timing. Further, at that time, the announcement was that Telesat, the satellite program, low orbit satellites, would receive $1.4 billion from the federal government. Telesat, what I did read, is more interested in providing service to ISPs and then down the road feeder routes, but they weren't interested in, at this time, are not interested in retail as Starlink would be. So having said that, let's take it up to about 2021. It seems then that the province realized that they had covered about 335,000 homes. So they still had over 300,000 to go. And it seems that this is when they decided a new program would come up, and they call it, let's see, they recognized that they were still missing the boat a little bit. So the new program is under Ontario Connects, and it followed those pillars I mentioned: invest, maximize, modernize. And the new investment profile, it's under Accelerated High-Speed Internet Program, ACIP is what they're calling it. So this is where we get into the reverse auction. So they put out, and they have not identified those lots to non-participants, non-qualified ISPs. So it's not information we can get yet. So they divided it up into lots, and they started a reverse auction process to provide specific services in those areas. They have not released, because it's ongoing right now, they have not yet released the programs, the lots, or anything. What they did release is 51 potential qualified service providers. That was done in the fall. And in November 30th is when they opened it up for quotes and so on. So they did tell us a couple of times that that information will only be forthcoming in the spring. So that could, let's see. They highlighted that there is supporting Ontario government acts, and therefore regulations are going to flow out of it. And one they mentioned was the Supporting the Broadband and Infrastructure Expansion Act. Another is Building Broadband Faster Act. And these are to remove certain barriers. One that was mentioned, of course, is the pole charges that are quite extreme for hanging fiber and so on. So that's going to be dealt with. But there were also regulatory issues that we can all imagine from a planning point of view were pretty significant. So they're still working on some of that. Some of that has not passed. And they have the modernization statement of intent, which I think it highlights what the service providers have to do and so on. So essentially, they talked about the money spent, and they talked about the new acts and the new regulatory framework. And I would just like to make a comment that EORN is handling things, somewhat differently than SWIFT, but it appeared to me that they share an equal house when it comes to the Ontario government. So that is what I'd say. I know that sounds I hope it's not too confusing. I could go into numbers all night long, but I don't think that's really why we're here. So thank you. I'll take a few questions if you want.
Before I take questions, I'd like to add a little bit to your report based on the last meeting that we had with Minister Clark and Minister Surma, if you don't mind, Councillor Gorell.
Go ahead.
So Councillor Gorell and myself and staff were on the call that was organized by our member of Provincial Parliament, Minister Clark. I feel it's important that the residents and the people who are constantly frustrated with this issue understand the frustration that we continue to have as a municipality, not to mention our member. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but it was quite apparent to me during that presentation that part of the reason that he had asked Minister Surma and her staff to present to us as the mayors of the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, he specifically asked for a call just for our county, to be clear, because he gets calls on a regular basis regarding the lack of connectivity here in our particular riding, and the lack of clarity in regards to this reverse auction process. Now, Councillor Gorell talked about it briefly during his presentation about the fact that they've just gone through the pre-qualification process and that has been done, and the auction process is only just beginning now. So I guess to put this in some sort of context, if you think government works slow from the outside, try working inside, because it's just as difficult. I said that 20 years ago when I worked at Queen's Park, when I was tasked with very minor things at the time, but the frustration to move these projects along, and as something as massive and so important, even the politicians who work at this every single day and who are getting calls and trying to move the needle forward, I don't want to say that they're doing their best at the provincial level, because I know that the council members here and staff members, I believe as well, share our frustration when we had a project that was shovel ready that could have went forward when we're talking about wiring our township. But now, because of somebody sitting in a very different office with probably very high speed internet, made a decision to take us down a different path. So here we are having to deal with it at this particular time. Minister Clark did his best to try to keep us informed with that meeting that Councillor Gorell is talking about, the one on February 3rd, which we appreciate, but yet really gave us no additional information at that time, other than to say the pre-qualification process has been completed and the reverse auction process is now underway. The main question that I put forward at that time, and I believe there was some other questions, unfortunately I couldn't stay too long at the end of the meeting. I had a funeral to go to. So, but I asked my question, which was, in the event that the reverse auction came up and nobody wanted to bid on one of the lots, as they call them, they call the different areas lots. Now, keep in mind, nobody knows what these lots look like. We've asked 100 times. Nobody will tell us. They say it's proprietary information. And they couldn't give us, basically the answer was, we'll deal with it if that happens. That really isn't a great answer in my particular mind, but I won't speak for the rest of council, but it really is discouraging that nobody's really thought of that, because we know that perhaps one of our lots or more than one of our lots, or even other lots in other municipalities, may not be desirable enough for anybody to bid on. We hope that they've laid it out such that it will be the case, but you know, it was very frustrating because the same day of this call, can you still hear me? I feel like I'm frozen. Am I?
You're good.
Okay, I'm good. Okay, sorry, my screen is frozen, so I wanted to make sure that they had put out something in regards, the Minister of Agriculture had put out something about rural education for rural Ontario, and I found it quite amusing because here they are rolling out rural Ontario education projects with a lack of connectivity. So anyways, nonetheless, I won't beleaguer the point. I was glad that Minister Clark pushed Minister Surma to further inform us. There wasn't a whole lot of extra or new information that was given, But at least we know that he continues to push the minister to ensure that Eastern Ontario, and specifically United Counties, Leeds and Grenville is dealt with. So
I
go
could
ahead.
just, and this did not get fleshed out much, but there was one piece of paper that was an addition between the two Zoom calls. And this one is specifically to our county. So listed here, it says $53 million went in for 9 projects within our county. And it lists premises reached. That means access. That doesn't mean they signed up. But there were no real details as to the what. So I'm sure some of it is some fiber to the east of us. I'm sure some of it is fixed wireless and so on. We know that one of the providers in our, pardon me, not in our tier, well, WTC up in West Point, the West Fork, they've received a significant amount of funding, but we don't know whether it's part of this 53 million. There were no time dates. There were no real specifics. But in our township, they have a list here. They say homes reached 3,293. That's over half. They're claiming over half of our township has been reached. And I'm just not sure how that was arrived at, but anyway, I'll leave it at that. Just one of the vagaries of government. Thank you very much.
Okay, Council. For whatever reason, my screen on my laptop is frozen. I'm just glad that you can continue to hear me. So if you'd like to speak, can you please unmute yourself and identify yourself? Otherwise, I will move on to the motion that's at hand.
Just, may I, it's Mark James, Councillor Jameson, Your Worship, just to thank Professor Gorell for that overview. Really appreciate it. And thank you for all the information you've sent to me. I'm looking forward to the book, but I've felt a lot more enlightened between what you're saying tonight and the other information. I'm sure the movie will be great too. And to Your Worship, I thank you for that overview. I think, you know, there's hundreds of millions of dollars of public money going into this, and the transparency is pretty breathtakingly little, given that it is so much public money. And I think the proprietary information factor can only be played so much. So what we're all looking for is a result, and I hope we get it, but I certainly appreciate the education I've had the last few days. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else that's looking to speak at this point in time? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, it's because the internet connection is unstable. Oh, good. Isn't that ironic? Anyway, so the motion that needs to go on the floor is that information items be received and filed. Can I have a mover and a seconder? I will need you to speak rather than use your hand because I can't see at this point.
Move Jameson.
Okay, so Councillor Jameson moves. Can I have a seconder?
Bulkey, I second.
Bulkey seconds. Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion that the information items be received and filed? Please speak up if you'd like to speak any further. Seeing none, I'll call the questions. Unless you're voting a nay, I will ask you to unmute yourself and say nay. Otherwise, I will assume it's carried. Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Yes.
And we're carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Eventually, we'll get back to normal here. Okay. So under on the agenda, number 6 is unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business? Ms. Venditti, go ahead. I could actually see you. I've got another call.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead to number 7. I thought you missed number 7.
Nope, I'm at number 6. So unfinished business. I don't see any hands up. I have a secondary laptop that's not frozen, so I'm trying. It's seemingly working now. I will ask for any other business. And under other business, I believe that CAO Donachie had some comments to make. And I'll recognize him and then go to anyone else who might have to add something. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Council. I'd just like to take a few minutes to discuss our waste disposal site attendance. The township has 5 of them. There's Paul, John, and Alan, and then we have been recently joined in January by 2 new attendants, Rick and Clarence. For many residents, the waste site attendants are their only regular point of contact with the township. Our waste site attendants are out there doing their job, making sure the sites function properly and keeping the sites tidy and safe for our residents in all kinds of weather. I think everybody gets a healthy appreciation for that. Over the weekend, one of our residents wrote to me to just let me know about his experience at the Briar Hill waste disposal site, where he's been going since 2015. He interacts with John up there, and he said that the attendant was always happy to greet him. He described him as kind and gentle, and that he reminded people of the rules and directed them to where they needed to dispose of their trash properly. These sorts of comments are by no means unique. The mayor and I were discussing a little earlier today, and we've both received emails from residents who have had similar experience going to any one of the 3 waste disposal sites. Council may recall Director Holliday had mentioned at the last meeting, committee of the whole, I think, that the township's representative from the Ministry of the Environment and Conservation and Parks visited the Lansdowne waste disposal site last week, or the week before last, excuse me. When she arrived, she saw Alan picking up trash and making sure the area was clean and tidy for people. And she stopped and chatted with him just briefly. When Director Holliday and the Manager of Infrastructure and Environmental Services, James Tuck, arrived for the meeting, she made a point. She went out of her way to say how impressed she was that she saw Alan was working away, tidying the site, getting any of the trash that was blowing around under control, and how welcoming and friendly he was. And this really set the tone for the meeting that the MECP person had with our staff. It just started off on the right foot. She was impressed. She was in a good mood, and that's largely thanks to Alan and all the work that's being done at the waste disposal sites by Director Holliday and the team. So I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to all the waste site attendants for what they do and how they serve the public so well and represent our township. So very well done to our gentlemen at the dumps. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Donachie. I appreciate, as I'm sure the rest of council does, to hear the good things, because we don't always hear the good things. We often hear the complaints. So thank you for sharing that with us and with the public. You know, there's something that somebody should have taken some Valentine's Day chocolates out to the guys who work at the dump. It's important. Okay.
I think our John is getting a Tim's card from this particular resident for
Nice.
all his kindness. So that's very nice.
Right, and not to mention all the additional accolades we've gotten from MOE and the work that's been done, because I don't know, the average taxpayer probably doesn't understand the rigor that is involved with that. So we thank all of the staff involved with that, right down to Director Holliday and James Tuck, who have been working hard to get things moving, and then all the groundwork that's done by our waste site attendants. So, any other business? Okay, seeing none. Next on the agenda is action required items, planning report SR-02322. So I'm going to read the motion and then request a mover and a seconder that the council approve the bylaw attached to planning report SR-023-22 as Exhibit A to convey the portion of the unopened road allowance shown as Part 2 on reference plan 28R-14913. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Lackey and then Councillor Foti. Okay, motion is on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? I see no hands. I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried. Excellent, thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda, next motion is that the council authorize the mayor and clerk to sign an agreement substantially in the form of attachment A to the operations report SR-026-22 with the Township of Front of Yonge regarding the joint procurement of surface treatment services. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Foti and Deputy Mayor Lackey. Okay, motion is on the floor, up for discussion. Any comments, questions, queries? Seeing, oh, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, do we have any indication whether or not they will come forward with their portion of the funds?
Director Holliday, you want to speak to that?
Yep, through your worship. I've spoken with Marvin Winters from Front of Yonge, and he's indicated that there are a couple little changes that they want to make to their quantities, but he has spoken with their mayor and they're on board. They're looking to work with us on this. And we're looking forward to working with them. They were great to deal with last year on the Boundary Road. There were no issues at all, and we're looking forward to working with them again for sure.
All right, great. Thanks, Mr. Holliday.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions in regard to the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried. We look forward to a long, loving relationship with the Front of Yonge in regards to road work. So thank you very much for seeking that out and creating that partnership. So I'm going to go and do the mayor's update, and then we'll do notice of motion announcements before we go on camera. We'll take a short break before we go on camera. So in the mayor's update, I just would like to welcome, if you haven't noticed already, our newly minted clerk, Ms. Megan Shannon, is on the line tonight. She is joining us remotely, but I just wanted to wish her all the best, and we're very happy to have her. So if everybody could give her a wave, that would be lovely. So Megan, thank you very much for accepting the position here at the township. We hope to have a long and fruitful relationship with you, along with the senior management team, and we wish you all the success. Wonderful. And we are also celebrating the snow moon with an evening of snowshoeing at Landon's Bay on Wednesday, February 16th at 5:30 p.m. Come and join us. Heritage Week is also coming up the beginning of February. Is coming up beginning February 21st. Watch for a series of social media posts as we celebrate the efforts of our Municipal Heritage Committee in creating heritage interpretive signs and heritage walking tours. And you've probably already seen some of these signs that already exist here in the municipal building, but now they exist. I know there's a few in Rockport already, and we're expanding those throughout the township. Thousand Islands Gananoque Chamber of Commerce is hosting their annual breakfast on February 24th. This is a virtual event that includes speakers, MP Barrett, MPP Clark, Mayor Loico, and myself. So hopefully I will see some of your shining faces there that morning on the call. Our 2021 annual report is completed and it is available on our website, and it illustrates some of our 2021 accomplishments. So I would implore people to look at that report to see the differences between 2020 and 2021, because the annual report does show the changing dynamic, especially with COVID. So it was a great report. So thank you to staff for putting that out. COVID restrictions are easing over the coming days and weeks. We look forward to reopening our doors to the public in the very near future. For those who may be uncomfortable with coming into staff will still be able to accommodate phone and virtual appointments. And as far as this weekend is concerned, check out the fireworks in Sealers Bay on the 19th at the Harbor. Fireworks kick off at 8 p.m. A reminder that the administration office and waste sites and library branches will be closed for Family Day on February 21st. Is there anything I've missed? I guess we can get there when it's in announcements, but I'll call for any notices of motion at this time. Any notices of motion? Seeing none, we'll move on to announcements. Any announcements? Does anybody have an announcement? Go ahead, Councillor Maybe, and then Councillor Oki.
Yes, thank you through Madam Mayor. Just to let everybody know, this is maple syrup season, so we can sweeten up the whole area by participating in any other pancake delicacy that you can dream up with fresh maple syrup from our local areas.
Lovely. Okay, any other announcements?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Conservation Authority, Cataraqui Conservation Authority, has seen fit to reappoint me as the Forest Water Protection Representative and also for Rideau Corridor Development. Lucky me. Thank you.
Thank you for representing us well on the Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority. Any further announcements? Seeing none, I'm going to put a motion to go in camera and then we'll have a 5-minute break before we reconvene. So the motion reads that council adjourn to form an in-camera meeting to consider personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Foti. And a seconder, Deputy Mayor Lackey. All those in favor of forming in camera? All those opposed? And we're carried. 5-minute